politics of respectability, and here we're really focusing on an idea that was particularly important for Black people in the early 20th century. It's not to say that respectability wasn't important in its own way for white people, but there's a particular passion, a particular emphasis that Black people in the late 19th and early 20th century felt for this concept of respectability. At the heart of it is this idea that you are representing the race, that you are not just an individual out there in society, you are a representation of something bigger too than that. And that if the race is going to progress in society, if you are going to challenge the racist hierarchy of American society, that you're going to have to prove, the race is going to have to prove itself. And the way it will do that is through individual Black people proving that they are respectable, that they adhere to Victorian morality, the idea of controlling sexuality, restricting it to marriage, that they will prove their fitness for citizenship and acceptance, that they do not fall into these stereotypes of the brutal sexual savage of the African American man and the Jezebel, the promiscuous sexual African American women, that those two stereotypes are meaningless, that instead they are much more than that. African American people are good, moral, respectable citizens. And finally, that they will resist deviancy, live up to the standards of the time. Supported by Black club women. Late 19th century is a time period where Americans love clubs. They join clubs in amazing numbers. And Black people, like other Americans, join clubs as well, lots of them, both men and women. And the Black women club movement tended to have this idea that they were the leaders. And this is mostly middle-class Black women, or at least respectable Black women, which could mean that you have a low income, but you have higher standards. You have education, possibly. You are connected to the church. You are seen as a respectable person, despite your lack of money. And so the goal is lifting as we climb. So it's not just that people, the club women themselves, are going to be raised and respectable, but they're going to bring other Black women along with them and raise them as well. The historian who really first discussed this concept, named it The Politics of Respectability, was historian Evelyn Brooks Higginbotham in her study of Black Baptist women in the early 20th century. And there's a real focus on domestic science, the idea that through classes in domestic science, through guidance, ordinary Black women will learn the proper way to behave and will be lifted up. As a critical part of this was the idea that you were going to raise ladies and gentlemen, that you were going to teach your children the importance of self-control, sexual restraint, and education. And so you have a lot of young African American, Black young people who receive a great deal of education. It was actually one of the incentives of people moving north in the Great Migration, was trying to get adequate education for their children. The hope was that respectability would be a form of protection, that if you looked like a respectable man or woman, particularly a respectable woman, that you would not be sexually assaulted, that you would not face violence, that you would not be treated with disrespect. It was a way of trying to control the risks that you faced on a daily basis from white society. Unfortunately, there seems to be an element of white society that became angry at Black respectability, that saw it as a challenge, and that in some cases it could actually, in and of itself, trigger violence and disrespect and assault. In some ways, it could also result in erasure of victims of sexual assault. If a woman wants to protect her reputation by not speaking about what happens to her, she sees this as part of respecting the reputation of the race by hiding what happened. It can be an erasure of this experience that happened to so many Black women. Historian Darlene Clegg Hines calls it the culture of dissemblance, was that Black women would focus on having a secret interior life that they contained to themselves, that they did not share, and that this was a way of self-protection because so much of what they exposed to the world was so harshly judged by a hostile white society, by even the culture they lived within, the community they lived within often, a dangerous world, and so keeping it secret was a way of keeping it safe. At the same time, that can become a way of containing yourself that has its own drawbacks. A real turning point is World War I, where you have a couple of things. You have the service of Black men overseas in World War I, and their experiences overseas, their experiences in different parts of the country. For a lot of northern Black men coming south and being directly confronted with the level of direct racism was an experience as well. So there's this idea that by serving in the military, you are earning respect, that people will look at you with respect. What happens, though, is in 1919, you have a series of race riots across the country that are targeted at Black communities. And a lot of Black soldiers coming home find themselves not just being treated with disrespect, but attacked with violence. And so it creates a level of indignation, of resistance, and what is then called the New Negro movement. And the New Negro challenge, which comes out in politics, but it also comes out in art when we talk about the Harlem Renaissance, when we talk about blues and jazz, the changes going on in Chicago. You have this New Negro challenge, and part of what many of them are arguing is that this very respectable way of behaving and presenting yourself, that cuts off important parts of people's African heritage and themselves, that we should look to Africa, that we should look to things like jazz and the blues, that we should draw in all of these elements into what it means to be a Black person. And of course, blues music is sort of an obvious challenge on that. This is Ma Rainey, a well-known blues singer, and she has one famous song. They said I'd do it, ain't nobody caught me. Sure gotta prove it on me. Went out last night with a crowd of my friends. They must have been women, 'cause I don't like no men. It's true I wear a collar and tie. Makes the wind blow all the while. And that's always been interpreted as suggesting that she had relationships with women as well as with men. She was married. And there were a number of blues singers, female blues singers, who did the same thing. And beyond just speaking about different sexualities, they also talked about alcohol. They talked about disappointing relationships. They talked about men who would cheat on them. They talked about sexual desire. If you listen to some of the blues songs from this era, they are extremely explicit in some cases. So it's sort of like a slap in the face for respectability by bringing all of these topics out, exposing them to a national audience. Despite that, respectability politics persists, and we can see it playing out when we look at the civil rights movement, for example, where there had been in Montgomery an ongoing confrontation, particularly between Black women, who were the majority of the bus riders, and the Montgomery bus system, and particularly the drivers of that system, both because of the harassment, the having to stand up to move to a different seat when more white people get on, but also because the drivers engaged in sexual harassment on a pretty frequent basis. And so there had been a number of black women over the years who had refused to get up when told to do so, and who had been arrested. But when they choose a woman whose case they're going to use as the symbol of the boycott, they pick Rosa Parks, a very well-dressed, respectable-looking, married woman. Ironically, for all of that, and though she does have that respectable aura about her, she is also somebody who has engaged in organizing for the NAACP, has gone into rural southern areas to investigate reports of rape of black women by white men, and who has actually attended the communist Highlander School for training for civil rights activists. So Rosa Parks is a respectable woman is always a little bit of a, I'm not so convinced entirely. So in conclusion, there's this concept of having to represent the race and having to have sexual restraint and self-control. At the same time, within the black community themselves, there's also challenges to this, that this is too much restraint, that this is leaving important things out, that this is not paying attention to the African heritage. But despite that, the strain of respectability really does persist in the following decades.